Chuck Davidson, President and CEO of the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce, MCC, the largest business organization in the province, representing nearly 10,000 organizations throughout Manitoba. Chuck is a tireless community booster and a passionate champion of Northern economic development. He was recently appointed to the board of the province Manitoba's Community Economic Development Fund, serves as co-chair of the Look North Initiative and the Provincial Tourism Strategy. He is president of the Chamber of Commerce Group Insurance Plan and past chair of the Canadian Chamber Accreditation Council, as well as past chair of the South Winnipeg Community Center. Chuck, Mr. Flin Flon and Snow Lake Man, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Joel, and thanks for inviting me to join you today. I think this is awesome. Obviously, I'd much rather do this in person, but we'll make the best of it with having to do it this way. So I was just looking at my calendar. It was 1 year ago today that we were in lockup because it was budget day. And why that day was interesting for me, it was because the next day we typically have one of our biggest events, which is a breakfast event with the Minister of Finance. And at the time, everyone, COVID had just been kind of discovered. There was all sorts of discussions around it. There was some tomfoolery going on in the Manitoba legislature. So I remember getting pulled out of, and if you've ever been to the legislature for budget day, they put all the stakeholders in lockup and you're there till the budget is read. And there was the opposition didn't want the budget to go through that day. I got called out of lockup and said, we're not going to be able to do that event tomorrow. And that would have been the last time that we actually had an event in person. We tried to push it back a couple of days. That's when COVID hit, and it was the 16th of March 16th. We closed our office, as did many Manitoba offices, and we went into lockup. And so there wasn't that opportunity to do an event in person. So what that meant for our organization was really that pivot. And many of you will know when you're involved in local chambers of commerce, and Joel kind of talked about it. We got 68 local chambers of commerce in the province, and in many of the communities that you work. We've got close to 10,000 businesses that we represent. And a big part of what chambers do is they do events and they do networking. And that's been gone. And so that's really been the pivot for our organizations. And many of you will know chambers of commerce are funded by their members. We don't receive government dollars. We raise our own dollars to run our organizations. That's a key reason why our main role is to advocate on behalf of businesses. And that's what we do. And that's a key component in my perspective is that that's the kind of way that we've always been set up. And so that's really changed the way that we've had to do things. And it's really changed the pivot. And so for our organization, not being able to do events, it was difficult. Obviously, a number of businesses were struggling, and it was not, in my mind, the right time as well to be going out trying to get new members at that time. We had to kind of figure out what's our role going to be in this pandemic. And so what we did is we quickly pivoted. And our pivot was really in terms of getting information out to businesses. And that's really been a key challenge for us, but really a key opportunity for the organization as well. So, and Mariette kind of talked about it as well. And it was kind of touched upon as well, and Joel touched upon it, and I've he talked about it from an economic development perspective. And the gentleman that he was thinking of was Mark Mirowich, and so Mark, obviously had concerns, and as many business people do, they're not used to dealing with government. They're also not used to dealing with government programs. And what happened, obviously, as a result of COVID is a litany of government programs that existed. The provincial government was putting out programs. The federal government was putting out programs. And so what we've really tried to do at our organization is try to help businesses to understand what these programs are, how they can apply, how they work, all the details around them. And so we've really made our website almost like a clearinghouse of programs and initiatives and how we can help businesses along and provide them with information so that they're going to understand. And so that's really been a key part of what our pivot has been, is really providing information out to members. So, through the course of this pandemic, and, we started right from day one, is setting up meetings with the local chambers. And it still happens to this day. On a weekly basis, I convene a meeting with all chambers of commerce in the province every Tuesday at 11:30. It's one of the great things about Zoom is that you know, while I haven't necessarily visited a chamber in close to a year, I can have them all together once a week for half an hour to 45 minutes. And what we do is we talk about, here are the things that we're working on, we're advocating on your behalf of from a Manitoba Chamber of Commerce perspective, but it also gets me the opportunity to hear what's going on in your communities. And I think that's really been that big part of the advocacy work that we're doing, is making sure that I have a good understanding when I'm having discussions with Minister Eichler, who I probably talk to 2 to 3 times a week on a variety of issues in his department, have been great to deal with in terms of letting them know what's going on in different parts of the province, what's going on in northern Manitoba and in the Westman area and some of the challenges they're dealing with, and how can we help and how can we make sure that they're addressing some of those concerns, as well as with government programs. You know, I talk about this as well. Early on, when you look back at the very beginning of the COVID situation, the wage subsidy program that the federal government put out was a 10% wage subsidy program for businesses. That was something through the chamber network across Canada we recognized was not going to work, and the challenge that businesses were dealing with was going to be much more significant. We were pushing for 75%, which is where it is today. And really, that really speaks to the importance of the network and being able to get that feedback from businesses so that when we're talking to those key stakeholders, these are the decisions that they're making. The same thing happened at provincial level as well. It was our organization in the chamber network, as well as a number of other associations, that really pushed for the Bridge Grant program. And that occurred when we got into that second stage of having to shut down back in November. What we clearly said to government on that occasion was there needed to be some supports in place for these businesses that had taken all the necessary precautions over those past 6 months. And I know that businesses in many respects were further ahead of public health in terms of putting those measures into place to make sure that they were operating safely, that they were following all the proper protocols. But government was pretty much left in their perspective with no other option but to close businesses to keep people at home. And so, you know, I think it was critical that, you know, our organization and others was pushing for that bridge grant and that $5,000 initial payment that came out in November, and then pushing for subsequent payments as well. And so now, you know, businesses can get up to $15,000 in through the Bridge Grant program. And I think that's a big part of this. Other things that we've really tried to focus on over the course of this past year is just understanding what the needs of businesses are. And, you know, early on as well, it was PPE was a challenge. So we worked with a number of other organizations and created something called B2B Manitoba, which provided businesses a vehicle to go and find some of that PPE information that they were looking for. Again, continuing to provide, you know, input on a regular basis. And, you know, that's the one great thing about Minister Eichler. He also convenes a meeting with business stakeholders once a week, every week, and has been doing this since the beginning of the pandemic. So that it's not just the Manitoba Chamber, it's many of the other key business organizations in the province have an opportunity to provide him with key feedback. And I think that's an important part as well. So that's something that we're doing. You know, the other thing when I talk about content is we really had a focus in terms of getting out regular content. So we increased, you know, e-weekly newsletters that we do through our website, toolboxes, you name it, anything that we can get into the hands of local chambers so that they can share it with their local members was absolutely critical to us in terms of helping our businesses to sort of deal with the pandemic and to try to get through this. The minister talked about it a little bit as well, that we're continuing to kind of work on a number of things. The minister talked about sort of an economic recovery initiative that I've been tasked to work with Economic Development Winnipeg and Dana Spiring specifically on. I'll talk a little bit about what we're looking at, and I think a number of the areas have already been touched on by other organizations, but basically what we're looking for is how can we continue to support businesses? And I think that's a key part of it. So that $50 million fund that the province suggested that we look at to help, we've used some of it already. So for instance, one of the programs that we launched was the Restaurant Relief Program. And the Restaurant Relief Program was one that we worked with the Restaurant Association. It's a $5 million program. And what it was is it's really helping restaurants that had to be closed, but had moved to a delivery mechanism. And so what we've been able to do is to reimburse them for all those delivery costs. That program we launched, it was launched on, and part of why we were asked to take it on was just the speed that we could get something like this up and running. So the Premier announced it on December 22nd that they were going to fund this initiative. We had it up and running and accepting applications on January 6th. So within a 2-week time frame, we took that program from an idea to something that we could get out into the hands of businesses throughout the province. And I'm proud to say, you know, to date, we've been able to put $3 million back into the hands of Manitoba restaurants. We're looking to be able to potentially do more. So we've got asks into the provincial government to extend that so that we could continue to support restaurants, because we know they're going to continue to be challenged, and a specific focus on rural restaurants as well. But other elements that we're looking at right now in terms of what we think and what we're continually hearing from businesses are, they really go into three areas. One is in skills development. And some of the recommendations that we're looking for is putting money into the hands of actual businesses so they can identify what their skills needs are. We recognize that a number of businesses have had to lay off employees. It could be a time before they're bringing people back. So how can we reskill those people, and how can we retrain them to meet the needs of what the business is looking for? So we're looking for some support in that area. So a grant program to help some of those businesses understand some of those challenges. The second one as well, and this one has also been talked about, and Mariette talked about it as well, is that what's become clearly evident is how quickly we've had to transition to an online business model. You know, the days of the bricks and mortar, if you're only a bricks and mortar store, that's not going to work in the new reality that we're looking for. And so we need to help businesses get more online. And so we've looked at initiatives like Digital Main Street and others to be able to provide some supports to help business to transition to that, whether it's updating their website, whether it's being able to do online commerce. So providing some resources and some supports and dollars specifically to help businesses to make that transition. And then the third part that we really want to focus on continuing to go forward is just this initiative of supporting local. And so we've provided some dollars through local chambers of commerce prior to Christmas so that they could help some of their local retailers to support local initiatives. That was a key part we thought in terms of how we can help support some of those local retailers during these challenging times. That support local initiative needs to continue. It needs to continue as we move forward, specifically as we head into the summer season, as we get more people immunized, as the economy has the ability to reopen. How do we continue to help? And so it's not just about supporting, local businesses and hotels and restaurants. That's a key part of it. But how do we also encourage people and businesses that have done all right to look at their supply chains? How do we encourage them to support local as well? How do we talk about procurement and look at that from a local perspective as well, and encourage businesses to look at what that looks like for them? So these are some of the key areas and some of the key recommendations that we've provided to government, and that we're hoping that we'll get some funding in place that we can really help Manitoba's economy to recover as we continue to move forward. So those are some of the key things that our organization and others have been working on. I know, Joe talked about RMED. That's something that we're working on. I'm also involved with CEDF. So we're really recognizing the importance of economic development as a key part of this. But a key part of what we're looking at is really going back to what are the needs that business is looking for, and how can we support them? Throughout this, we've heard continuously they needed information. They needed help identifying what the programs were, and then identifying and putting in place programs that are actually going to meet their needs, whether it's in skills development, whether it's in upgrading their what their needs were going to be from a digital perspective, and again, supporting them to support local initiatives. So those are some of the key things that we're continually working on. We're going to continue to push this out. We don't look at this as is basically done by any means whatsoever. It's going to take a number of businesses quite some time to get back to normal. But through the chamber network and working within organizations like EDAM and the economic development people throughout the province, and the government, who has been great to work at from an economic development perspective in terms of their receptiveness to some of the changes, and the Team Manitoba, we think that we can continue to move forward. We can continue to be successful, and really support the businesses. So maybe with that, I will leave it there.